Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's your I didn't just dodge a bullet, but a tactical nuke story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My mom's BFF had a son get out of prison. He was doing tattoos for a living. We live in a state that still had tattoos illegal at the time, really? So he and his mom came to our house to give us a tattoo. I was like 18 at the time, and I think he was in his early 20s. We were told he went to prison because, while he did have a drug problem at the time, he took the fall for someone carrying an F-ton of meth. His mom kept hinting, and eventually outright suggesting, I let him take me on a date. What? She swore up and down he needed a good influence like me. I'll admit, I did feel pressured quite a bit. His mom was one of my favorite people in the world, and I felt like I was letting her down, but I was not feeling it. Dude was not attractive at all. Worst of all, he was covered in swastikas that he claimed was to survive prison. I also found it really creepy that he kept oddly stroking my feet while doing a tattoo several inches above my ankle. But we managed to end the tattoo party with no dates made. Cool. About 3 months later, I'm listening to the news, background noise, and I hear her son's name mentioned. Police are looking for him. He strangled his girlfriend and all 4 of her children. What? After the girlfriend caught him molesting one of the kids. I was once the last person to cross a bridge before it fell. Looked in my rear view to see what the noise was, to see open air where there should have been road, and some white-faced people who were just about to cross a well. There were a few days where all of my appliances were breaking down. First, the clothes washer, then the air conditioner, then the dishwasher. Then one morning before leaving for work, the refrigerator stopped cooling. I was in a terrible mood on my commute to work, and then I had a flat tire in the middle of rush hour traffic. I pulled over to the shoulder. Normally, I would have got out immediately and started changing it. I can change a tire in 5 minutes. I wouldn't have even made me late. But everything breaking in the days leading up to this flat had me defeated. I rested my head on the steering wheel a few seconds and said out loud, "Why me?" when almost as an answer, I was hit from behind. Traffic has slowed because of my pulling over, and an ambulance driver transporting a patient between hospitals decided to go around the traffic by driving in the breakdown lane. Damage to my vehicle was minor, but if it had been any other day, I would have been taking my jack and spare out at that moment and been crushed between my car and the ambulance. Everything worked out great. I got a 5-figure settlement from the ambulance company, as they were clearly at fault hitting a car in the breakdown lane. It was a non-emergency transportation of a patient, and when I got home that day, all the appliances were miraculously working again. Some of these stories could be chalked up to the old adage, everything happens for a reason, if you believe that sort of thing. This is a good example. I take my dogs outside around 8 p.m. every day. One night, I was just kind of depressed and procrastinating on everything, watching a movie. At the time I was normally outside, my next-door neighbor was robbed and shot to death, and the murderer tried to get in my apartment next. Thankfully, my door was locked, and he let it go and ran off. That was in 2019, and the trial still hasn't happened. Just a little anger at the court system thrown in there. One night when I was younger, probably about 9 years old, my 2 brothers and my mother's friends, 3 kids, were playing at the school playground near my mother's friend's house. It was probably 8 p.m. We were all about 7 to 14 years old, my brother being the oldest. A group of men in a white SUV were stalking us for a while and continued to drive back and forth from the playground we were at. Every time we tried to go back to my mother's friend's house, they would turn sharp and race in front of us. The house was probably 100 yards away. Every time we tried to turn the other way and run to other houses, same thing. It happened for about 10 minutes straight. Eventually, we noticed one of the men jumped out of the back seat. Legit, 15 seconds later, my mother pulled up to the close side of the playground to pick us up to go home. We jumped in the car and raced home, while most of us were crying from fear. Then we made s'mores. Definitely a memory, lol. I met this one guy as a young adult. He was a mutual in my friends group. Thought he was cute. Gave him my social media info, and we chatted back and forth for a little bit. I moved away from the area not long after we met. After I moved, he messaged me constantly, asking me to come over to his house, attend parties with him, come to his area so he could buy me a drink, so on and so forth. I politely declined every time. This went on for literally a year. Eventually, I entered into a committed relationship. Shortly after, he asked if I had a boyfriend. I said yes, and he proceeded to send me a bunch of pictures of his wiener. I love that word. I instantly blocked him. 2 years later, through our mutual friends, I found out that he had been accused of drugging and raping several women. When police came to his house to arrest him, they found a woman in a dog kennel in his living room. Not sure the entire story behind the girl in the kennel, but just thinking about it freaks me out. Yeah, if I had found out that a person I was interested in was keeping a human being in a dog kennel, I'd be pretty freaked out too. Well deserved. Not me, but my godfather. He worked in the second tower that was hit on 9/11. Luckily, he had car trouble that morning and had to take his car into the shop. Not me, but my mom. One day a male coworker of hers asked her on a date. She was friends with him and liked him well enough, but she had a boyfriend at the time, so she politely turned him down. He took it like a champ and jokingly said, you should just dump that guy. I'll treat you much better. Less than a year later, he was arrested for murdering his ex-wife with an axe because she wouldn't let him borrow her car. I made friends with an older guy, mid-20s, when I was 15. He seemed kinda lonely but otherwise harmless. Probably should have recognized that a grown man being friends with a teenage girl was weird, but I was naive and very trusting. He started trying to flirt with me and eventually made some rape threats. That's flirting, at which point I cut off contact and basically told him to get effed. He was arrested a year later for child porn and indecent liberties with a minor. Can't say it was much of a surprise, but I'm still so relieved that I cut contact when I did. I was bullied pretty badly in middle school by this one kid. Before I could finish 7th grade, my parents and I moved to another state. On my last day in middle school, the kid who bullied me was unusually nice to me. Found out after my last day in middle school in that town that my bully beat a teacher with a metal baseball bat. Apparently he was gunning for me. I got frustrated that I didn't show up and decided to just take it out on a teacher. Last I heard, he went to juvie for that. I used to go to raves and take ecstasy when I was 19 or 20 in the late 90s. One weekend, my friends went to a rave and I had to stay home to watch my little sister. About a dozen people in my friend group went and ended up buying paramethyloxymethamphetamine, PMMA, sold as ecstasy. Half a dozen had seizures or convulsions and ended up in the hospital. At least one person I'm still in touch with has severe kidney issues as an adult as a result. I used to hook up with guys on Craigslist. I was going through a really self-destructive phase in my life, and that's really all I have to say about that. I was supposed to meet up with this one guy. I was on the way to his motel when I got a text from him, clearly an accident and meant for someone else. It was a picture of me, and it said something like, "Got a new toy for us this week." I don't know who it was for, but we were only supposed to hook up that one night, and then I was leaving. Alright, investigators of this post, what do you think? Sex trafficked, some type of gang assault, or I don't know, let me know. A friend of mine dated an ex-cop who was an asshole and ate all of her child's food. He was later found to have cut up 2 women and dumped them on the side of the highway in suitcases. Luckily, she broke up with him before his killing days. Back around 2000, I worked at a sandwich shop at a mall. Was into experimenting with hard drugs at the time, most ecstasy. A female coworker and I had conversations about doing E at some point, but wasn't really sure she was serious. She was a 10 and I was a 6 at best. I finally get hooked up with some E and we set up a night at her house, just her and I. A couple nights before we were to roll, we closed the store together. She had these 3 guys she said were her brothers waiting for her at the mall entrance. She then confirmed the date, time, location before she left as I locked the shop down. I pretended to go back in for something, then spied on them as she approached them. She gave a suspicious nod to them and high-fived the biggest guy before they walked out. This raised major red flags. Night of, I tell her that I might not come because I was tired, and she convinces me out of what felt like panic on her part to get me to come. She confirms everything again on the landline phone. This was before I had a cell phone, and I heard over. The directions put me out in the middle of nowhere to a dirt road that led into the mountains. At this point, I start freaking out, and as I'm probably a mile from the house, I decide to park behind some thick brush off the road, enough to be hidden. I said if nothing weird happens in the next 15 minutes, I'll continue to the house. Within 3 minutes, headlights come up from where I came and passed me by. It was a truck with those 3 dudes from the mall riding in the back with shotguns in hand. This was the only time I ever prayed to God that they wouldn't see my car. They continue on with no issue. I'm not 100% sure what might have happened if I went to the house. I might be dead if I went according to plan. I ignored her messages for 3 days. Then, when she came back to work, she asked what happened. I told her I got lost and some other excuse. Never discussed anything with her after that and had no issues with those guys again. I ended up getting transferred to a different store a few weeks later. Count my blessings every day. 14-year-old me walking from Gravesend to East New York from a party because I lost my bus fare. It took me hours. I made my way up to Brooklyn houses, so almost home, and it's like 2 a.m. at this point. I hear some footsteps behind me, then more footsteps, then more. Not wanting to turn around, I speed up and eventually break out into a full-on run for Pennsylvania Avenue. Lucked out, my dad was a cop and was already out looking for me. Picture one lone 14-year-old scrawny white boy being chased by at least 20 kids in East New York. Then the beautiful sounds of whoop whoop, followed by lights, and my step-pops and his partner stepping out like a boss. My mom threw fruit at me when I got home. A guy I met at my old job seemed really sweet and would talk to me during my shifts almost every day. I'm female and he's male, only a couple years older than me. One day he asked for my number and I liked being his friend, so I gave it to him. He started texting me and we'd have casual conversations about our days. After a while, he'd start showing up at my work with candy and flowers for me. I thought it was nice, but kinda weird since we were just friends. Eventually, he ended up confessing his feelings for me, but I wasn't looking for a relationship of any kind at that point, so I cut it off. A couple months later, there was a party at his house. I went with some of my friends who were also friends with him. I was hesitant on going, but my friends convinced me. At some point in the night, he was absolutely wasted and pushed me in a corner and started telling me all the dirty shit he wished he could do to me. I was extremely uncomfortable and luckily got away from him and ended up leaving. Never talked to him again. Some time goes by and I noticed he hasn't come into my work at all recently, but thought he was maybe just embarrassed about what happened with me. Come to find out, he was on house arrest for raping a minor. I ran into him at the grocery store while he still had his ankle monitor on and awkwardly said hi. He then went on to say, "I'm sure you heard about what happened. Bitch was talking about being a freak over text but didn't want to deliver in person, so I had to show her what a real freak like that is." I was mortified and just walked away. I later found out the details of what he did to that poor girl and it was absolutely horrific. He's in jail now. I was going over to my home village and all the girls, my friends, wanted to come with me for the drive, but I'd shit to do, so I told them I hadn't time to wait for them and they could come with me next time. About halfway there, a man who recently bought land in the area who was from another country and didn't know the road got the sun in his eyes and thought he was driving from tro to tro and road, not through a crossroad, and drove straight through and I crashed into the side of him. His car was much bigger and newer than mine and my car was totaled. I was fine, but he had to kick my way out of the car because the quarter panel and all the metal around the wheel arc, etc. was up outside my door. My engine was under me and the various fluids of the car were pissing around the road. If the girls had been with me, most of them would have been killed because a few of them would never put a seatbelt on for you and at least one of them would probably have been smoking. In November 2019, while working in China, I asked my employer when we could be taking Spring Festival winter break in 2020 so I could book a flight ticket. Bizarrely, none of my coworkers wanted to give me an exact date, claiming they didn't know when the term ended. I was an English teacher at a private boarding school in Wuhan. For some reason, they didn't want to say. It was like nobody wanted to take responsibility for me. So I decided to ignore their stupidity and just picked a date to book a ticket. As it turned out, it was a date a day or so after term had ended, but They still shut down power down in the campus because nobody told security I was still there. Managed to get a hold of someone so I wasn't locked in. Following morning, get a taxi to the airport, get to Tokyo, hang out with my friend. Wuhan gets locked down. One day, my uncle attacked my mom, his own sister, leaving her hospitalized. My now husband and I gave my dad a ride home from visiting my mom the evening it happened. We had all been there to see her. My dad, my two brothers, one's fiance and daughter, my husband, our daughter, and myself. My husband and I had plans to stay at my parents', but his back hurt, since they just had put a new place on our family home. They hadn't completed moving. We would have had to sleep on the floor. With a sore back, we knew we couldn't stay. The next morning, my mom called me crying. The same uncle stirred my parents' back door on fire. He waited for my dad, brother, and his girl, and my 10-month-old niece to leave from the front. When they did, my uncle shot at them 5 times. My brother took 3 to his back. My uncle's intent was to kill everyone that left that house. Had we stayed, who knows what would have happened. Not entirely sure if this can be applied, but here we go. A very long while ago, when I was real young, maybe 6 to 8, my mom was taking me and my older 8 to 10 brother to gymnastics. We were allowed to sit in the front as long as we didn't distract our mom driving. My mom asked us if we wanted to sit in the front, and we both decided not to for some reason, which was weird because we usually fight to sit passenger. We're on our way there, and right as we start heading down one of the main roads, a very large truck swerves into our lane, hitting the back of our car, and we're thrown forward into a parked car on the side of the road. My mom's leg was broken, and my brother needed stitches in his lip that he bit through, and I was fine, just some car-related trauma I still have. The passenger seat, though, was decimated. This car was in a ball, the engine on top of it with a large hole in the dash and tons of broken glass in the seat. If my brother or I sat shotgun that day, we would be 6 feet deep right now. TLDR. Brother and I decided not to sit passenger seat of car, and are not dead. Me and the old man were having lunch at a diner. Waitress was cute and I flirted a little. Dad noticed and on the way out left my number on the table. Girl texts me. We chat for a few days, go out a few times. So I run into a friend of mine and mention the girl to her. Friend goes, she's engaged to a guy I know. They're trying to get pregnant, but his swimmers aren't working so well. So I decided not to continue this relationship, let it go. Turns out some other guy fell for it. She got pregnant and acted like it was her fiance's.